Every roof you have ever seen is sitting under a fortune and doing nothing with it. Over the next hour, I am going to take you from knowing nothing about solar panels to understanding exactly how they work, how they get installed, and how people build a real business selling them. No jargon you can't follow, we build it up step by step. Here is the journey. First, why solar has suddenly become a real opportunity on ordinary rooftops. Then the science, how a flat panel quietly turns sunlight into electricity with no moving parts at all. Then the system around it, inverters, and how you connect to the grid. Then the part that pays the bills, installing on homes, sizing a system, and the government subsidy. Then serving businesses where the numbers get much bigger. And finally, the business itself, the different ways to sell, and the margins you can actually earn. Let's begin. Start with a problem everyone shares. Every month an electricity bill arrives, and every year it seems to climb a little higher. That money just leaves forever. Now look at the same house from above. The roof is bare. Sunlight is pouring onto it all day, completely free, and it's being wasted. Solar is simply the business of catching some of that sunlight and turning it into electricity, so the bill drops by 80, 90, sometimes 100%. And here is the scale of it. Enough sunlight strikes the earth in a single hour to power all of humanity for an entire year. The energy is not the problem, catching it is the opportunity. So why is this a business right now and not 10 years ago? 4 things changed at once. First, panels collapsed in price. A solar panel today costs roughly a tenth of what it did a decade ago. Second, grid electricity keeps getting more expensive, so the bill you avoid is bigger every year. Third, the government is paying. Under the PM Surya Ghar scheme, a home can get up to 78,000 rupees back. And fourth, the market has barely started. Fewer than 5% of Indian rooftops have solar. Cheaper hardware, costlier power, public money, and a wide-open market. That is why now. Part 2, the science. To sell something with confidence, you have to understand it. So let's open up a solar panel and see exactly how light becomes electricity. It starts with the sunlight itself. Light does not arrive as a smooth stream, it arrives in tiny packets of energy. Each packet is called a photon. Think of sunlight as a constant rain of these energy packets, falling on everything. On a bright day, about 1,000 watts of sunlight lands on every single square meter of ground. That is a lot of free energy, spread thin. A solar panel's whole job is to stand in that rain and catch it. So the question becomes, how do you turn a packet of light into a flow of electricity? This is the heart of everything, the photovoltaic effect. It sounds complex, it really isn't. A solar cell is a thin slice of silicon, built in 2 layers. The top layer is treated to have spare electrons which carry negative charge. The bottom layer is treated to have empty spaces, called holes, which act positive. Where the 2 layers meet, the junction, nature sets up a built-in one-way push. Now a photon strikes the silicon and knocks an electron loose. That freed electron gets pushed by the junction out through the top. It has nowhere to go but through your wire, so it travels along, lights the bulb, does real work, and returns to the bottom. That steady flow of electrons through the wire is electric current. No fuel, no moving parts, no noise, just light in and electrons out. One cell is tiny. It makes only about half a volt and just a few watts, not enough to do much. So we wire many cells together. 60 to 144 cells, sealed under glass in an aluminum frame, make one panel, the rectangle you see on roofs. A single modern panel produces around 400 to 600 watts. Then we connect many panels together into an array. And an array is measured in kilowatts, enough to run a whole home. So the latter is simple. Cells make a panel, panels make an array, and the array is sized to match the electricity bill. Now a fair question. Of all that sunlight, how much actually becomes electricity? Of the 1,000 watts landing on a square meter, a good modern panel converts only about 200. That is an efficiency of roughly 21%. The rest mostly lives as heat. And that number is the ceiling, not the promise. Heat, dust, and even a little shade all pull it down. This is why a panel is rated at strong noon sun. Real output rises and falls with the weather. A useful rule of thumb for India: every 1 kilowatt of panels makes about 4 units of electricity per day. Remember that number, you will use it on every sales call. Walk into the market and you'll meet 3 kinds of panel. Monocrystalline, sleek and black is the most efficient, around 21%, and it's today's default choice. Polycrystalline, the older blue speckled panel, is cheaper but less efficient, around 17%, and it's slowly fading out. And thin film, light and even bendable, is the least efficient, but useful where you have lots of area and odd shapes. For a normal rooftop where space is limited, monocrystalline almost always wins because it squeezes the most watts out of every square foot. Part 3: The system. Panels alone are useless. To power a home, you need a few more pieces working together. Let's meet them. Here's a catch nobody expects. Your panels make direct current, DC, a steady one-way flow. But your home doesn't run on that. Your lights, fans, and fridge all need alternating current, AC, a wave that flips back and forth 50 times a second. So we need a translator. That translator is the inverter. The inverter takes the panel's DC and turns it into clean AC the grid can use. But it does more. It constantly hunts for the maximum power the panels can give, it handles safety, and it reports how much you're generating. It is the brain of the whole system, and because it works hardest, it's usually the first part to fail, so its quality matters more than anything else you buy. Now the clever part: how a home connects to the grid. This is called on-grid or net metering, and it's the most common setup. During the day, your panels often make more power than you're using. That surplus doesn't go to waste, it flows out to the grid, and your meter literally runs backward, banking credit. At night, when the panels are asleep, you simply draw that credit back from the grid. So the grid acts like a giant, free battery. You deposit power by day and withdraw it by night. At the end of the month, you're billed only on the net, units taken minus units sent. No expensive batteries needed. This is exactly why a home solar bill can land near zero. But sometimes you do want to store the sun, and that means batteries. There are 2 situations. Off-grid means there's no grid at all, so batteries carry you through the night. Think of a remote farm, a mobile tower, or a village home far from the lines. Hybrid means you keep the grid but add a battery for backup, so when the power cuts out, your lights stay on. Very popular where the supply is unreliable. But here's the honest trade-off: batteries add real cost and complexity. Every battery you add stretches the payback period, so most homes with a stable grid skip them entirely and choose net metering instead. So what actually goes into a system, and where does the money go? The panels themselves are the biggest slice, a little over half the cost. The inverter is next, around 14%. Then the mounting structure that holds the panels to the roof, about 12%. Then the balance of system, the cables, the meter, the safety gear, another 12%. And finally the installation and labor, about 10%. Notice this: panels are half the bill of materials. That is why your profit comes down to 2 things: how well you source the hardware and how cleanly you install it, not any single magic gadget. Part 4: Installing on homes. This is where a customer becomes a project and a project becomes money. Let's walk through it exactly the way a good installer does. The very first thing you do is size the system, and it's just one small sum. Take the electricity bill and read the monthly units. Say this home uses 600 units a month. Now recall our rule: each kilowatt of panels makes about 120 units a month. So you divide 600 divided by 120 is 5. This home needs a 5 kilowatt system. Then check the roof. A system needs roughly 100 square feet of shade-free space per kilowatt, so 5 kilowatts wants about 500 square feet. That's it. This one back-of-envelope calculation is how every single sales conversation begins. But not every roof is a good roof, and knowing the difference saves you from bad projects. 4 things matter. 1. Direction. In India, panels should face south to catch the most sun across the day. 2. Tilt. Panels lie at about 15 to 25 degrees, so they face the sun's average height through the year. 3. Shade. This one is sneaky. Even a single shadow from one tree or one water tank can drag down a whole connected string of panels, so the roof must stay clear from about 9 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. And 4. Strength. The roof has to safely carry the weight for 25 years. Get the survey right and everything after it gets easier. So how does the install actually happen? 7 steps. 1. The survey and design. 2. The application to the electricity company, the DISCOM, for permission. 3. Fixing the mounting structure to the roof. 4. Bolting the panels on. 5. Wiring everything into the inverter. 6. Installing the special net meter and getting it inspected. And 7. Switching on and claiming the subsidy. Here's the surprise for most beginners. The physical work, the part that feels big, is usually just 1 to 3 days. It's the paperwork, the DISCOM approvals and the meter inspection that stretches the whole thing into weeks. Managing that patiently is a real part of the job. Now the moment every customer waits for: the payback. When does this pay for itself? Take a 3 kilowatt home system. After the government subsidy, the net cost is around 1 lakh rupees. That system saves roughly 28,000 rupees a year in avoided bills. So watch the 2 lines. Your savings pile up year after year until they cross what you paid at around year 3.5. That crossing point is the payback. And here's the beautiful part: the panels are warranted for 25 years, so after the payback you get 2 more decades of power that is essentially free. Pay for about 4 years, then enjoy 20 for nothing. That is the pitch. And that subsidy deserves its own moment, because it is your strongest closing argument. Under the PM Surya Ghar scheme, the government pays part of a home system. The slab works like this: 30,000 rupees per kilowatt for the first 2 kilowatts, so 1 kilowatt gets 30,000 and 2 kilowatts gets 60,000. For the 3rd kilowatt, you get another 18,000, bringing a 3 kilowatt system to 78,000 rupees. And that is the cap. Go bigger: 5 kilowatts, 10 kilowatts, and the subsidy stays at 78,000. The money lands directly in the customer's bank account after inspection, and many states add a top-up on top. For a salesperson, that number cuts the price by 1/3 and closes the deal. Part 5. Serving businesses. Homes are a fine start, but the real money in solar sits on the roofs of shops, offices, and factories. Here's why. It comes down to the size of the bill. A home might pay 3,000 to 8,000 rupees a month and need a small 2 to 5 kilowatt system. A shop or an office pays 20,000 to 60,000 and needs 10 to 50 kilowatts. But a factory or a warehouse, it can pay lakhs every month and need 100 kilowatts stretching into megawatts. And 2 things make businesses even better: customers. First, commercial tariffs are higher than home rates, so every unit you save is worth more. Second, factories run during the daytime exactly when the sun is shining, so the solar power gets used instantly. One factory rooftop can equal hundreds of homes in size and in revenue. But businesses fund solar in two very different ways, and you must know both. The first is CapEx. The business simply buys the system. It pays up front or with a loan. In return, it keeps 100% of the savings, gets a tax depreciation benefit, and after a payback of 3 to 4 years, the power is basically free. The second is the OpEx or RESCO model, and this one is clever. A developer builds and owns the system on the customer's roof at zero upfront cost to the business. The business just buys the solar power at a rate lower than the grid through a long agreement called a PPA. The developer earns for 15 to 25 years, and 60 to 70% of commercial deals now use this model because that's where the steady, recurring money lives. Let's put real numbers on it with one example, a factory with a 100-kilowatt rooftop. At commercial scale, that system costs around 45 lakh rupees. It generates roughly 130,000 units of electricity a year. At a commercial tariff of about 9 rupees a unit, that's nearly 12 lakh rupees saved every single year. So it pays for itself in under 4 years. And across a 25-year life, it saves close to 3 crore rupees. Add the accelerated depreciation benefit, and the returns look even stronger. This is why serious businesses see solar not as a cost, but as one of the safest investments they can make. Part 6. The business itself. You now understand the product deeply, so let's answer the question you came for: how do you actually make money selling solar? Solar has a value chain, and you get to choose your spot on it. At one end sits manufacturing, building the panels. That takes enormous capital, a factory, and deep expertise, very hard to enter. Next comes distribution, holding large stock and supplying dealers, still high capital. Then EPC, engineering, procurement and construction, the companies that design and install, medium capital. Then selling and dealing, closing customers and arranging the install, low capital. And at the far end, referring and maintenance, tiny capital. Here's the key insight: you do not need a factory. Most people start on the right-hand side, referring, selling, installing, where the capital is small and the demand is huge. The closer you are to the customer, the less money you need to begin. So concretely, here are 4 doors into the business. 1. Referral or affiliate, zero capital. You simply send interested buyers to an installer and earn maybe 2,000 to 5,000 rupees for every closed job, the easiest possible start. 2. Dealer or reseller. You hold some stock, sell it, and arrange the install for a margin of 10 to 18%. 3. EPC or turnkey. You design, supply, and install the whole thing end-to-end for 15 to 25%. 4. A franchise. You write a known brand, a Tata, a Luminous, a Waaree, and they hand you leads in trust. The smart path is to start light with referrals, build a reputation and real reviews, and then grow into stocking and installing yourself. Now the number you really want, the margins. Selling just the panels, the hardware, earns a thin 8 to 12%. Inverters and batteries do a little better, 12 to 20. But the real money is in the service. Doing the full EPC, the design and installation, earns 15 to 25%. And a good dealer, blending hardware and service, can see 20 to 35%. But let me be completely honest with you, because most videos won't be. Those headline margins look wonderful, but soft costs quietly eat into them: failed site visits, redesigns, delays, marketing, often 5 to 10%, and competition keeps squeezing. The lesson is clear: earn from service and design, not from just reselling boxes. Let's make it painfully concrete with the profit and loss on one real job, a 5 kilowatt home system. You charge the customer around 3 lakh, 25,000 rupees. Now your costs: the panels run about 1 lakh 60, the inverter 45,000, the structure and balance of system 40,000, and labor plus soft costs roughly 42,000. Add those up and your gross profit is around 38,000 rupees, a little under 12%. That may sound modest, but do a few of these every month and add ongoing maintenance contracts, and the recurring income becomes the real prize. The whole game is this: buy well, install cleanly, and kill the soft costs. So how do you actually begin? Here is a simple 90-day path. First, learn the basics: sizing, wiring, and the DISCOM rules. The government's own MNRE site and honest videos cover it for free. Second, tie up supply. Find a distributor for panels and inverters that are properly approved on the ALMM and BIS lists. Third, register as a vendor on the National PM Surya Ghar portal and with your state DISCOM. Fourth, start with referrals, close a few jobs, and collect reviews and photos, because trust is your real product. And fifth, grow into full EPC, carry stock, hire an installer, and sign maintenance contracts. Small, steady steps. Before we finish, let me show you the risks, the ones nobody advertises. First, price wars. Aggressive, cutthroat bidding can compress your margins fast. Second, soft cost leakage, those failed visits, redesigns, and delays that silently eat your profit. Third, quality and warranty. A bad inverter or a leaking roof becomes your liability for years. And fourth, policy dependence. Subsidies and net metering rules can change with a government notification. None of these should scare you off, but they explain who wins. The winners don't compete on being the cheapest quote, they compete on trust and on clean, reliable execution. So let's bring the whole map together in one breath. Sunlight arrives as photons and a silicon cell frees electrons, and that flow is your electricity. Cells make a panel, panels make an array, sized to the customer's bill. The inverter turns DC into a C, and net metering turns the grid into a free battery. You size a system by dividing monthly units by 120, and you need about 100 square feet of clear roof per kilowatt. The subsidy pays up to 78,000, and a home pays back in 3.5 to 5 years. Businesses hold the big bills, funded by CapEx or the zero upfront OpEx model. And to earn, you enter close to the customer, refer, sell, or install, because service earns the best margin. You win on trust and clean execution, never on being the cheapest quote. Sunlight is free, the business is turning it into savings people gladly pay for. Thanks for watching.